I have been playing an early build of Baldur's Gate 3 for over 15 hours now, which may have been enough time to see most of the early access content if I weren't switching back and forth between runs or creating new characters so often. After being so excited to play BG3 and being drip-fed content over the past year or so, I was certainly full of anticipation to jump into the world. And while I had high hopes that the storytelling and systemic gameplay was going to be interesting to play with and attempt to break, I didn't expect Baldur's Gate 3 to address one of my deepest pet peeves in RPGs, and that's how the genre handles failure. In Baldur's Gate 3, failure actually becomes fun. Let me start by saying even in the face of the early access bugs and glitches, the game both plays and looks great. And as someone who's gone through a bunch of real life D&D campaigns, seeing a lot of those tabletop elements come to life really is incredible. But I'm here to talk about narrative and story today. Now there are a few ways that some of my favourite role-playing games have handled bumps in the road or failures or end states in their quests. Take Fallout for example, when you are teased with the prospect of a dialogue choice in the conversation box, but you don't have the relevant stat, so you're left thinking, what if I were able to select that option, but in many cases never getting the chance to, basically failing at the first hurdle. Other games address any failure to adhere to the quest line with an unsatisfactory full stop, basically cutting that story thread there and then, taking that as a, yep, you failed, that's the end of that, but, you know, better luck next time. But Baldur's Gate 3 immediately felt like a different beast with how it handles its narrative, story beats, and the options that are available to the player. In my first hours, I tried to resist the urge to save and reload if I failed dialogue options or dice rolls, and I honestly recommend you resist that same desire, despite how tempting it may be. In fact, doing so may mean you'll miss out on much of the ebb and flow of some of the dialogues and smaller stories within the early access build. Failure and balked up dice rolls are just as important to the story and development of your character and overall experience as successes and natural 20s are. While I know it's fun to see the word success pop up on your screen as you roll well, I've come to realise that in Baldur's Gate 3 at least, a video game where I only succeed isn't what I want, and it really isn't representative of the tabletop game that it's built upon. In this way, BG3 really is an extension of the Dungeons & Dragons tabletop storytelling, because no matter your build, your stats, or the choices you make, the chances of failing are never zero, and your success is never guaranteed. In that way, it's up to the players to figure out creative ways around problems and navigate hiccups in your quest progression. And this is something that Baldur's Gate 3 seems to excel at, even in its early access. Not once in my 15 hours of playing have I encountered a quote, fail state that I wasn't able to work my way around. Be that through some clever exploration, dialogue choices, approaching with different characters, or in one or two cases, violence. The systemic storytelling and gameplay of Baldur's Gate 3 means that the game almost scabs over any damage you may deal to it, or any cuts you make into its narrative threads. One small but interesting example of this is when I encountered Lyselle trapped in a cage on my second run. On the next meeting, the tieflings guarding her had been in combat with the bandits that I'd convinced to leave the ruins that I wanted to explore. But the male tiefling died in a battle that happened completely without my knowing. In this case, I noticed that the dialogue had been written unvoiced from multiple perspectives, just in case an issue like this may occur. During the first meeting, the conversation would involve both tieflings, while in this instance the game just kept on trucking with the one remaining taking the lead. That allowed me to progress seemingly without any major hitches in a way that felt so organic that I would have had no idea that anything was different if I hadn't already visited that section once before. Now if I took on those quests and actions in a different order, perhaps freeing Lyselle before I spoke to the bandits, things would have played out in a new direction as well. Again, this was a pretty minor example of the system in action, but that doesn't make it any less interesting, especially as the rest of the game is built in the same way. And I couldn't help but go back to thinking about previous RPGs and how this quest or dialogue may have broken if this were any other title. This also speaks to the replayability Larian is aiming for with both the early access version of Baldur's Gate 3 as well as the final game. With that in mind, I want to talk about the absolutely daft number of options that are available to you out in the world and when interacting with NPCs that inhabit it. There are unique dialogue options available depending on your race, class, background, and whether you're tapping into your illithid powers, as well as the combination of all those working in tandem. And that's before we even get into the possibility of communicating with the dead or the wildlife.
How about this? You can stay if you keep those ugly feet on the ground. These trees are mine. Follow the rules and I won't have to intervene. Got it?
Even something as seemingly simple as a locked door can be taken on in a staggering number of ways, from lockpicking, stealing keys, using eldritch powers to smash the thing down, teleporting through a hole in the wall, or jumping in via the roof. I've honestly yet to be disappointed when it comes to thinking, I wonder if this will work. There are also other ways that a supposed fail state can be conquered, or even the potentiality of one can be minimized. You can initiate contact and conversations or interact with the world with any of your characters, not just your created one, which in turn allows you to tap into the more beneficial racial traits and stats. If you fail a check on an inanimate object, you can switch to a new character and thus potentially create another opportunity to try again. If you don't like the way a conversation is going, you can still manipulate the rest of your party outside of that chat and put them into some more advantageous positions, or manipulate the world as the conversation continues, with this element in particular seeming to carry over many inspirations from Divinity Original Sin. Now, knowing that a balked dice roll isn't going to change things and that even a high chance of success isn't a guaranteed win also made me much braver and more open to the ideas of taking risks and trying new options while exploring BG3. In previous RPGs, I would usually pick any option or event that would grant me the highest chance of success or grant me the opportunity to see as much of the content as I could. But knowing that it wasn't quite as black and white as that in Baldur's Gate 3, options that were riskier, narratively interesting, or that I thought suited my character became much more alluring and exciting. Again, that feels like something very D&D. Tapping into the story and playing on the background you created yourself, all while the game drip feeds you opportunity after opportunity to continue stories, dialogue, and narratives both on the macro and micro level, reaffirming the player that there are so many options here before you delve into becoming a murder hobo. Although if you want to play that way, you do you.
You made a potential threat into a certain one. We don't need to pick every fight.
The approach Baldur's Gate 3 takes to success and failure really is quite a refreshing one, and something I am really excited to see built upon. When you factor in its depth at this early stage in its production and add on the scope that Larian wants the game to be, I really can't see a situation where your options are going to be found lacking. They're only going to become more numerous as time goes on, and it's no surprise that it's recommended that you run through the early access version more than once, as you would be hard pressed to have the exact same experience every time. I want you to go into Baldur's Gate 3 not thinking of failure as failing. Instead, it's more of a hidden option in a dialogue tree that will allow you to progress your experience even in the face of the number 1 on your dice. It just might not progress in the way you expect it to, or in the way you want it to. And after all, a hero or adventure that has nothing but wins and victories in it doesn't make for the most exciting tale to tell down the tavern.
My friend, every story benefits from a dragon. Until we meet again.
That's been my main takeaway from Baldur's Gate 3 so far in the just shy of 20 hours that I've got to play it. But I'd love to know what you're excited for when it comes to travelling across Faerun and the Sword Coast. There is a lot to tap into in BG3, so we've got plenty more content planned, so to be sure you don't miss out on that, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below and let your thoughts be known down in the comment section. My name is Dave, you can find me and all my RPG ramblings over on Twitter @IrregularDave, and until next time, thank you so much for watching.